And okay, I would like to once again thank you, everyone. It's so great to see so many familiar faces. Feel free to use the chat to put in any of your questions that as we go through the presentation. With that, I'm going to go right into the slideshow. We'll have plenty of opportunity later for questions. I know I do have a couple of other elected in the audience that I'll introduce. I've seen a couple of them in here that they may be able to, or they may be willing to answer a question or two later or help out. But we all have learned a lot through our process of being elected through this time. So, you know, we're happy to be able to share our knowledge as well. So with that, I am going to share my screen and we'll get started here. And once again, I'm just so appreciative of everybody who has shown up tonight. Thank you very much for being here. I will say that this is a topic that I've really learned a lot myself about going through this, and I do have more questions here that I have as well. And once again, this is going to be a very broad overview of the subdivision process for rural areas, talking a little bit about jurisdictional overlaps and what the process looks like. I know we're not going to have all the answers for you tonight. I'll just say it there, but hopefully be able to point you in the right direction, or if you have other questions, we'll be able to help you, or we'll try our best to help you out with them later. So essentially, we're just do a bit of a welcome, go through a few definitions of some commonly used terms when we're talking about subdivisions and land use planning. Look at a bit of a process and flow chart of a simplified version of this, I'll say. Look at some of the jurisdictional responsibilities, talk about some of the submitted questions and any questions that have come up along. Once again, feel free to put questions in the chat. Because I have this on the presentation view, I am not able to see any of the chat. So once we get a little bit further along and get to the question side, that's when I'll stop for questions. And we can always go back to slides if you have questions on anything that I've presented. So with that, I'd like to welcome you all. Once again, you all know me, Lori Pratt, Area B Director for the Sunshine Coast Regional District. The Sunshine Coast Regional District is on the traditional territories of the Sechelt and the Squamish First Nations. I noticed that we do have some elected in our audience. We have from Area E, Donna McMahon, Area D, Andreas Ties, and Area A, I saw Leonard Lee. And if I see if my other fellow elected in there, I'll introduce them when we go back to the other screen. Please make sure that you have muted yourself, and please stay muted just until the end of the presentation. And we'll do questions at the end. We can always go back to any of these slides. And once again, acknowledging that I'm certainly not a subject expert in this. I've pulled together a lot of information based on the questions and a lot of research that I've done on this topic, and knowing what I'm hearing in the community. I know that there will be more information or more questions that come up through this process, and I certainly have done my best to make sure any of the information I'm providing to you this evening is true. And of course, you will certainly be subject to the occasional opinion of mine. I'm not going to lie, I do have a few opinions on process as we go through here. And with that, the one other thing that I did want to just address just briefly, because I know it's come up a couple of times, being that it's very public in what my professional career is outside of the regional district and being a realtor. And I just want to just very quickly acknowledge that I am, if Michael, I see that you keep on coming up. Can you please mute, please? I just want to acknowledge that I have a couple of different pieces of BC legislation that do mandate that I don't put myself in a conflict of interest. If I find myself in a conflict of interest, I do need to recuse myself from any decision that I have a pecuniary or indirect pecuniary interest in. And also through my oath of office, I make that declaration. But also as a realtor, I'm also under provincial legislation to not put myself in a conflict of interest with any client. And that means recusing myself from transactions in which I may have an additional interest in. So with that, we will go on and we will start with some of our definitions. So a subdivision is a division of land into two or more parcels, whether by a plan or meets or bounds, and this is from the Land Title Act. And so this can include changing property lines, stratifying a property, or making one property into two or more. So if it's a large lot, making it into more. So for example, let's say you have a property and it's large enough that you want to change it into two smaller ones, and you can go ahead and you can go through that process. I'm just doing basic definitions at the moment. Next up, official community plans. So these are things that you may have heard of us talking about OCPs or the official community plan. So these are visionary documents, and they're typically 10 to 20 years documents before they're renewed. They are the long-term vision of a community. The committee that develops these community plans, they consist of staff and community members along with technical experts. And there's a high degree of community consultation as you go through the process of developing that official community plan. All of the official community plans of the Sunshine Coast Regional District can be found on the SCRD.ca website. And our regional district has 7 official community plans for our 5 electoral areas. Zoning bylaws. So zoning bylaws essentially stem from official community plans, and they're the guide for land use within a defined territory or region, and they're carrying out the community visions that are set through those official community plans, or if there's a regional growth strategy, it follows along those lines. The regional district here has 2 zoning bylaws. We have 310, which encompasses areas D, B, E, and F, and then 337, which is for Area A. Bylaw 310 is currently in the process of an update, and we should be hopefully seeing an update soon to the board, which would mean publicly, and be able to share it and show you what updates are in process. Any updates to a zoning bylaw require bylaw amendments, and so all of those decisions are made in the public realm. So you can actually go through and see where a bylaw has been updated. So next up, some other definitions that you've probably heard before. The approving officer. So the approving officer is the individual or office that approves subdivisions for the electoral areas of the regional district. This is within the Ministry of Transportation. An area planning commission. So an area planning commission is a collection of individuals that are appointed by the regional district board, and they advise the board on all matters referred to them by the board or by the area director respecting the land use, preparation, adoption of a community plan, or a rural land use bylaw and proposed bylaw or permit. Each one of our electoral areas does have an APC, and our APC for Half Moon Bay met last night, and I saw my APC chair in the audience. And it's great to, my APC chair for Area B is Kelsey Oxley, and she's a fantastic addition to our APC, and so we're very happy to have her. Referrals. So when we're talking about referrals, these are any agencies, internal or external, to whom an application is being forwarded. So for example, an application for a subdivision may come forward to the planning department. And then what the planning department does is they take a look at that and then they send it out to any other departments that need to know about it. So for example, infrastructure services. One of the things infrastructure services would be would be able to tell what advise on the water hookups, or if they were looking at a wastewater treatment system, looking at how that goes or how that's going to happen. If there's going to be a park dedication, it would go over to the Parks Department as well. And so the planning department is the one that takes in the application, and then from there it's referred out to internal agencies within the regional district, and then externally as well. Like, so for example, for First Nations consultation, or if it's maybe something that may affect the town of Gibson's, let's say if it's in area E or area F right along the boundary with the town of Gibson's, in some cases the planning department may refer it out to another local government. A public information meeting. So a public information meeting is an informational meeting that's held by a subdivision applicant or their agent, and it's to provide the community an opportunity to ask questions and provide comment on the subdivision proposal that's coming forward. So it's definitely required when OCP and zoning changes are being requested. So like, and especially if a zoning bylaw amendment involves more than 10 hectares of land, 10 or more lots may be created with the plan, or if the proposal is seen by the planning department to be major in nature, like if it's going to maybe change the feel of a community. Development permit areas or DPAs. These are requirements that are outlined in each electoral area's official community plan, and they're also shown on our maps section of our website. And I will, if we have time later, I'm going to take you through a little bit of a tour of the SCRD maps and GIS system, and show you where to find out some of this information too. So the DPAs serve various purposes. So for example, protecting the natural environment, such as creek or shoreline areas, indicating where there might be hazardous site conditions, such as steep slopes, rockfall, or flooding. And they also ensure that the form and character of a commercial, industrial, or multifamily development follows relevant design guidelines. Public hearings are different than a public information meeting. So at a public information meeting is a more casual kind of event where you have the applicant for a project answering questions and taking comments on a project, where at a public hearing is a very definite legislated process. So we have strict guidelines on what we have to follow. So it's an opportunity for the public to speak, and affected citizens to speak and provide their views to the elected on the adoption of a new or amended official community bylaw, plan bylaw, zoning bylaws, any agreement bylaws, or also bylaws for early termination of land use contracts. So some interesting public hearings that have happened in the past, of course, have been around short-term rentals. We have one upcoming. You can find it on the SCRD. I've got the link there. We have one coming up next week on March 29th for an area. For a property in area F. And even if you don't wish to speak at it, it's a really good thing to go and see and just see how the process works for a public hearing. It's almost a courtroom type setting where you're coming in and the citizens get to come in. They have 3 minutes to speak. They will be given more chance to speak. Everyone that wishes to speak is always given a chance to speak at a public hearing. But you don't always You don't always have to speak if you don't want to. And it's important to make sure that you're speaking to the amendment that is in front of you. Another term that often gets brought up is regional growth strategy. And so essentially what a regional growth strategy is, it's a regional strategic plan for growth of an area encompassing both rural and municipal areas. So this is something that's I would say is on the horizon for the Sunshine Coast as a whole. Is something we definitely see that we need, especially as our community is growing. We all know of the issues that we're having with the housing situation, with fringe area issues, I'll say, between the municipalities and the rural areas where, you know, you have that rural meets the rural meets municipal, and just being able to streamline some of the issues and be able to, you know, present that as a united voice. It's a very collaborative document. Okay, so next up, I'm just going to take a little drink of water here. And I'm sorry if I'm talking too fast. I hope everybody can hear me okay. So next up, so this is a bit of a flow chart. So if as a property owner, you wish to subdivide a property. So this is a simplified version of what the process looks like. And I had to pull a few things out because it was getting even more complicated than this, but I really wanted to show what happens if as a property owner, you want to subdivide a property. Essentially, because the regional district is not the approving officer for subdivisions in rural areas, you are making a three-way subdivision, or a three-way application at the same time. So you'll be making an application to MODI, so the Ministry of Transportation, as well as to the regional district, and also you are making it to Vancouver Coastal Health. And the purpose for Vancouver Coastal Health is around the septic side, of course. And so once your application is in, and I'm going to take a step back before you actually wish to subdivide, and it's always best to start with a phone call or an email to any one of these organizations to talk to them and find out exactly if it's going to fit within the community plan and the zoning bylaws, if there's any additional information that you need to put together in order to make sure your application is full. So it's each one of these organizations, the very first thing they say is make sure you start with a pre-application phone call to make sure you have all of your information together. The next step of the applications on all sides of them are they're going to be reviewed by staff, and then they're going to be for Vancouver Coastal Health, they have very strict guidelines. So it's going to be approved or denied based on whatever factors staff have told you to do. So I'm going to take us back over to with the MODI and the regional district side. What's going to happen after your applications are reviewed by staff is they're going to refer them out to any external internal agencies. And MODI and the SCRD staff work closely when they have an application come in. And what they do is they, you know, because MODI needs to make sure that the regional district or the application fits in with any of the regional district zoning bylaws, with the OCP, and it's going to be a fit. And then from there, they go through their process and they make sure they work with the applicant to make sure that the applicant is doing the roads up to their standard, what the load limit's going to be, etc. When it goes to the, if there's no change in any density, no change in the OCP or in the zoning bylaw, the next, if there is no change, it would still get referred and reviewed by staff at the regional district. It still gets referred to the Area Planning Commission as an informational item, which gives them an opportunity to comment, but there's no approval needed by the regional district as long as it fits in already with all of the zoning bylaws and the official community plan that's already set by the by the regional district. If there are changes to be made with zoning or an OCP amendment and that application process needs to start, then that triggers another process with the regional district. So MODI would still be working with them on the MODI related issues around roads and lot placement. And the regional district would be looking around the other sizes around, it starts a legislative process around zoning and OCP amendments. So when the OCP, sorry, just a second. So when the application is being reviewed, if there is a need to be a change for zoning and OCP, and they've looked at all of the lots and seen where everything is, it gets referred once again to the local area planning commission. And then from there, and the applicant can always attend the area planning commission to talk. And so they can do that whether or not they're making a change to the zoning, or they can also do that if there is no change to zoning to when it's referred to the APC, they can speak there and answer any questions. So if there is a zoning change to be made, that would trigger a bylaw amendment, which would trigger a public information meeting and then a public hearing, depending on how far it went down the line. So public information meetings are typically handled after first reading of a bylaw amendment change. And then public hearings aren't typically held until after second reading of a bylaw. So what happens is the public information meeting, there might be some changes that are made to the proposal based on information that's coming from the public or questions or comments. And there might be an amendment made to the bylaw. And then that still gets forward, and those are read at a public committee meeting and a public they're adopted at the board level. So there's a couple of different opportunities for the public to be able to have an opportunity to listen and for the elected to have a chance to talk and discuss. So after it's gone through all of that process, and let's say best case scenario, the community is supportive of it. We had one just on Reed Road in Area E. We had the public hearing. The entire public hearing was probably, I think, about 12 minutes long, which is pretty fast for a public hearing. And it was very simple, just a small densification, a small size of lot change, and it was still in the feel of the neighborhood. It was just a slight reduction in size. So the neighbors were supportive of it, and the planning department was supportive of it. Area director was supportive of it. So it ended up, it went through, and I think we've had that one adopted now. I'll confirm with Dawn as we go through. So after the public hearing, once again, the bylaw amendment is read the third time, and then it's adopted, or it can be abandoned. It can be abandoned at any part of the process. And in some cases, they're abandoned because the property owner might have different needs or wants, and then, or they may want to continue to go through or change things, or they may, the community just may be say, no, we don't want this to happen. So it does not, the decision is made by the board to abandon that bylaw. So there can be a lot of different factors in play there. But once the regional district goes through their policies with the zoning changes and OCP amendment bylaws, it still needs to go back to MODI to be finally changed with the for the subdivision. Okay. I'm sorry, it's a really complicated screen here, and there's a lot of information on there, and I know the flow chart might be a little bit confusing. So what I wanted to show you next is, so we're at a point where, you know, so let's say as a property owner, you wish to subdivide property, and as a community member, you see that this property has been purchased and you're wondering, okay, what's going on here? I want to know. And see, you know, what's going on, or I want to be able to affect change, or at what part of this process can I, as a community member, as a citizen, as a neighbor, at what part of this process do I have a voice here, or where can I find out answers or question, or, you know, I just want to know, or I don't agree. So there's the biggest overarching one, I will say, where the community's vision is heard for what they want to see in their community, is the adoption of official community plans. So those are the long-term visions for our communities. Half Moon Bay's, our last OCP was updated and adopted in 2014. I'm sorry, I don't have the dates of the other ones off the top of my head, but all of those are on the regional district website. So that's where the vision is. That's where our zoning bylaws, our zoning changes all stem from. If something is in concurrence with the official community plan, then that's good for us. If we want to change how our community plan looks, then we need to look at it amending or rewriting or adopting a new community plan. So another way that we can, as citizens, as neighbors, as community, that you can have voice in what's going on is, just one second here, okay. Oops. Is through a regional growth strategy. As I mentioned earlier, that's the long-term strategic vision for our community as a whole. We don't currently have an active one for the Sunshine Coast, and that is definitely something that we've discussed as elected, that it's something that we definitely need. And because that will look for the long-term growth as we go forward through the Sunshine Coast as a whole. Another way that you can have voice is at the area planning commissions. So the APCs are actually public meetings, and we tend to not have a lot of public attend them. Most people aren't really aware of what an APC is and what happens there, but they are a public meeting, and all of the information for when they are is posted on the regional district website, and all of our chairs for all of our APCs are listed there as well. So you can always send an email to the chair of an APC and find out, you know, more information, or when suitable, or how they're meeting. The agendas are all there listed as well. And you can find out more information there and attend and listen to presentations as they're happening. The other thing is SCRD committee and board meetings. These are open meetings unless they're closed by resolution. And so you can always attend a committee or the board meeting and listen to presentations there. You can ask us questions in the public question period at the end of the meeting, or it's a great chance to just meet the directors in person. And we always, you know, we're always happy to see you, and we're starting to meet back in person. All of our meetings are a hybrid as well right now, and they are all posted on YouTube if you would like to view them after. Another way of finding out more information or having your voice heard about a project is if there is a public information meeting happening about a development or a subdivision, it's make sure you're going to the public information meeting, even if you don't have direct questions. It's a great time to find out exactly what is happening. We can often get caught up in the, hearing about things through the community, and it's best to see the plans in what they're actually going to be. So I always encourage attending a public information meeting, even if it's outside your area, just to find out maybe what's going on somewhere else along the coast. And the public information meetings are also posted on the regional district website. They are, as I said earlier, they are held by the applicant. However, they are supported by SCRD staff. So SCRD staff can always be there to answer any technical questions that you might have. Another place to have your voice heard, of course, is the public hearing process that comes between second hearing and adoption of a bylaw. Those are, as I said, they're a little bit more formal, legislated, very legislated procedurally on how they go forward, but it's an amazing spot to go and hear and speak and have your voice counted for exactly how you're feeling about and what your opinion might be on a project. And I'm just going to apologize. I think I might have my dog bell go off. So next up is, of course, your elected representatives. Your elected representatives are the, if you have questions on a project, they can help you with that. They can point you in the right direction. I am so sorry, everyone, for that's Elska. She's my very large anxiety-filled dog. So anytime she feels the earth move, she has to say something. Just one moment. Elska. Sorry, I am so sorry. So I hope your elected representatives, all of our contact details, there goes all of the nerves. Once the dog starts barking, you just let everything go. Okay, so all of your elected representatives, all of our contact details are on the SCRD website. Feel free to reach out to us. We are here to help answer questions, and you know, we may not always know the answers, but a lot of the times we know where to go. Although I will say with this process here, I got a lot of questions from my other elected representatives and I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know how to answer that one. So yeah, so this is, these are learning opportunities for all of us, and we're here to help in what we can do. So please make sure you're reaching out to us. And of course, staff, is any of the staff at the regional district or any of the municipalities, they're all really well trained, and often they are going to they know where pieces of a project are better than what we would as elected, because they're working with the applicant, they're working with the other agencies. And using the example, and I've got this in the presentation a little bit later, we last night at our APC, we had a couple of subdivision applications come forward, and because they fit in with the zoning and with the OCP that was already planned for that area, it's not triggering that bylaw amendment, the zoning change or the OCP amendment. So essentially it was just coming to the APC as an informational item. The APC did put some comments and questions back to staff because it's, there's been a few changes since the OCP has been adopted, and a few concerns about, okay, what else is going to be happening for this area. But through that, the applicant was also talking about how he met with planning staff just up there a day or two before he met with the APC, how he also met with the parks department to discuss the park dedication that they're going to be doing and what would work. So staff works very closely with applicants to make sure that they are getting that the applicant understands what's going on, and also so that they understand what's going on these properties that are being subdivided. So yeah, so anyways, and the other areas of here that I've left in of the spreadsheet or of the piece before are when pardon me, of the flow chart earlier, are the spots when you might be able to have a chance to have that information come forward to you as a member of the public or as citizen. And once again, that's what the process looks like for somebody who wants to put in a subdivision application. It can be a little bit less complicated because if they don't need to do the zoning changes, then 5, 6, and 7 don't happen on the SCRD side. But otherwise, this is a very simplified version of what does happen. So next up, I wanted to talk a little bit. I have a lot of questions coming in about jurisdictional responsibilities, jurisdictional overlaps, and what happens in those cases, or who's in charge of those items. So when it comes to something, whoops, just hang on one second. So jurisdictional responsibilities, there's a lot of overlaps in what goes on as a development comes forward. So these were some of the topics that I had brought forward to me that I thought I would put down here. So when we're looking for stormwater plan and management, when a subdivision is planned, they also have to put in a plan for how they're going to handle stormwater, or they call it drainage a lot of the time too. And so they have to put, this is where some of my opinions are going to start taking forward. So there's stormwater, as we've seen, especially with our atmospheric rivers here on the Sunshine Coast, is not properly managed. It's not properly planned for, and it's not properly managed even after those plans are put in with Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure. So a developer puts in their plan for stormwater management or stormwater and drainage and their management plan. And then the onus after that is on the Ministry of Transportation to make sure they're doing it. However, it does not always happen. And that's my opinion coming through, maybe with a little bit of fact backed up with it. But we've all seen it happen. It doesn't, they're not properly managed. And I will tell you from speaking with approving officers at the Ministry of Transportation in Victoria, they know it's a problem and they know they don't have a handle on it, but they don't know how to get a handle on it. It's certainly not within just within our area. It is amongst all of British Columbia. And so this is a concern that they do have, and it is something that they are working on. However, they're stuck because there's so many cross-jurisdictional, so many overlapping municipalities and regional districts throughout the province that they don't have a clear way forward for it themselves. So wastewater planning, as I said, wastewater, so septic systems, et cetera, need to be signed off on by Vancouver Coastal Health and then the Infrastructure Services Department at the Regional District is involved with that, especially if that Vancouver Coastal Health, or pardon me, that developer is wanting to do a more like a community system because if they because of maybe the way the land lies, they can't get the proper perk for wastewater or for septic, or if they want to densify a little bit, so they need to come up with a larger plan. If the plants are of a certain size, they will eventually come to the regional district for underneath our wastewater infrastructure department, part of the infrastructure department. But there's that's another one of those cost jurisdictional pieces where we're working with Vancouver Coastal Health. Vancouver Coastal Health is the authorizing authority, and And if it remains outside of the regional district, they continue to be them. The maintenance of the system or the maintenance of any wastewater, of course, if it's just a regular septic field, it would just fall to the homeowner. If it is a wastewater system of a over a certain size, it gets transferred over to the regional district, and the service users, the landowners in that area will be the ones looking after it. If it's a smaller system, and an example of that would be in Cove Beach, they have a community septic or community wastewater treatment plant there. However, because of the size of it, it's being looked after by the property owners themselves. Roads, building roads. So building of the roads into any kind of subdivision does fall under the jurisdiction of the developer. They have to bring them up to the standard that is spelled out in their agreement with Ministry of Transportation as they go working through their subdivision. So those are the specs that lay with that lay between them and between the developer and the Ministry of Transportation. However, when it comes to maintenance, so maintenance of all roads within rural areas falls under the Ministry of Transportation. Except the Ministry of Transportation has a rating system, and on what level of road is deemed to have how much service is going to be required for a certain road and being upkept to a standard. So if the road, if you're looking at a road such as I'll use Goat Trail 101, maybe that's a bad example because of the way it looks right now. However, they are cleaning it up. That's going to be a higher priority for them than a road such as the one along even Brooks or Truman, because those roads aren't used as much, or even the ones that go into Wood Creek Park in Area E. Those roads aren't as heavily used, so they're rated less, so they keep them to a lesser standard. All of that information is on the Ministry of Transportation. You can find out the rating of a lot of roads right there. You can also ask our local representatives, Joey Trasker or Michael Braun, to look into it for you. And I'll be able to provide those contact details later. Water. So water is one of those things that is of keen interest to all of us here on the Sunshine Coast. So in regards to providing water to a property, when the applicant or the property owner is going through their process, they need to make sure that they're paying their development cost charges for water supply, and making sure that staff is going to look at all of their proposals for water connections, water main extensions, water meters, fire hydrants, etc. So that's going to go through that's one of those referrals that the planning department puts out to the infrastructure department, and is to make sure that, okay, yes, so we're looking at water. So in some cases, it may be suitable for a subdivision to be on drilled water, just because of their distance from a water line. In other cases, it's going to be very easy for them to hook into the water main. So in that case, the infrastructure department would look at it and say, okay, what can we do here? All of our rural areas do have the water meters now, so they'll be able to track if there's leaks in the system, and be able to give the users an idea of like how much water will get used in an area over so many homes. Next up, garbage. Garbage is and waste disposal falls under for areas D, E, and F falls under the responsibility of the regional district. We also manage the landfill that all of the garbage on the Sunshine Coast goes to. And so that's looked after by us unless a development looks after, in some cases, you may have a commercial subdivision that chooses to go another way. Well, a commercial subdivision would have a commercial contract because it's not residential, but that is also something else that goes to a different department of the Infrastructure Services Department. Building permits fall under the jurisdiction of the regional district. We approve building permits for rural areas. The municipalities, of course, are different. And we also, we look after building inspections for the Sechelt Indian Government District as well, and building inspections for all of the rural district or electoral areas of the regional district. Okay, and so then I also had two other questions that around tree cutting and rock blasting, because these are often concerns that come up when a subdivision is being planned and it's and it's in the works. And this one is, I know of, this one's troubling a lot of residents right now, because especially with a lot of the flooding that we had in the fall from the atmospheric rivers, especially after having so much tree loss, maybe higher slopes in a lot of areas, and then also with the rock blasting that's happening. So we do have a couple of, and I'd be happy, I'll share these more. If you want the additional information, please reach out to me and I will, I'll find you them, and we might be able to share a screen later about that. But we do have a tree cutting bylaw that shows where the tree cutting permit areas are within the regional district for areas D, E, and F, or B, D, and F. They're mainly around riparian areas, and it's quite limited. And there's to be frank, there's not, outside of those areas that aren't covered by that bylaw, there's not much we can do about, if somebody wants to cut trees on their property and they're not within one of those riparian zones or those bylaw areas, essentially it's their property. They can, and forgive my language on this, but they can do what they want to do because it's theirs. And this is something that we've actually brought forward to our larger organizations about, through our elected organizations at the, I think we brought it to Vancouver Island coastal communities, as well as to the Union of BC municipalities, about tree cutting and tree cutting bylaws for rural areas, because regional districts don't have as much power as a municipality does in this area. A lot of our powers are governed by the province. And for anyone that took Director McMahon's course, Donna McMahon's course, highly opinionated course on regional districts, which was amazing. She certainly explains a lot of the troubles in there with a regional district, as we don't always have the jurisdiction to do the jurisdiction. It falls within our area to get these things done. However, we have no power to get them done. And because of our budgeting constraints we can't spend money on items that that are outside of their taxation area. So if somebody wants us to, or if we have extra money in our landfill fund, we can't take that money and put it into bylaw enforcement. Or if we have extra money in the water fund, we can't put it into bylaw enforcement. So it's it's a larger topic for discussion, and there's certainly more work that we can be done there. The rock blasting was another one, but it was mainly, it was around a sound piece. Of course, rock blasting to get properties ready, they have they have to make sure that they've, you know, they've got their safety plan and everything in it. But if there is continual noise beyond reasonable levels, we do have a noise bylaw at the regional district. So I would certainly, I'll be touching base with that individual after as well. I just wanted to make sure it was highlighted here as one of the things that we can do a certain amount, but there's not a lot of teeth that we have on some of these issues. Next up, so we talked about the authority and the responsibility, but where does the buck stop? And I think I touched on that with a lot of them. I think the next thing, okay, what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to pause our share. Oh, I'm going to stop the share now so I can get a chance to see some of the comments that have come in, and we can always go back to this because I know there's a lot of questions and that have been coming up. And I mean, that's a lot of information. And as I said earlier, this is just a very broad overview. So it's and just highlighting some of those issues, hiding some of the jurisdictional challenges and a bit of the process. What I would like to do is I'd like to remind, I would like, I just had a note that Modi is responsible for stormwater management. I just want to make sure that I do highlight that because I know that is a constant and consistent issue right now. I'm going to ask everyone to make sure that your comments in the chat and anywhere else as I open it up for questions and comments is please keep the conversation respectful. I have no problem muting you or booting you out. This is it's meant to be an informational and conversational session. I want to make sure everybody has a chance to ask a question if they do. Okay, and with that, would anybody like a couple of minute break before we go into questions, or would anyone like to ask any questions about something that's come up?
Lori?
Yes.
I think
oh, hi, Bob.
Hi, some of the questions in the chat were actually pretty good.
Perfect. I'm just going to take a couple of sips of water and I'll take a look through there. Okay. Feel free if anybody needs to, I've committed myself to being here until 8 o'clock. So we've got lots of time. And if there's any examples of anything that you want to see, please make sure you let me know because I'm happy to screen share. You know, if there's something that comes up, we can find some information for you and screen share and help. So, but what I will do, thanks, Bob, for mentioning that about the chat. Okay, so I'm going to start. Jason, I see your electronic hand is raised. So Jason, do you want to go ahead with your question?
Yeah, I saw Landon's question at 6:26 p.m. in the chat. It's probably better if you just grabbed it from there, and that's one that was mostly interesting to me. It's like there is a loophole being used at Bayview Hills that has allowed the developer to proceed with development by way of obtaining a timbermark logging permit. This allows the developer to create roads, grade properties, and so on, calling it logging activity. Yet this area has been developed, or not been developed, but it's been sold as subdivision, but there hasn't been any discussion about how or any of the downstream effects from that. And I think that's what most of the people here are looking into, right? Is about a lot of the Bayview Hills stuff. So it's like, how is they able to go through the process of dividing and selling these properties, yet none of the other process that we've seen looks like it's been done?
Okay, so okay, so what I can tell you, and some of this I will say, this is where this is where it's where the real estate background does come in handy. Oh shoot, sorry, I just lost the questions. Just bear with me one moment. Yeah, no, that's an interesting one. So, okay, bear with me. Okay, so okay, so Landon's question, there's a loophole being seen at Bayview Hills. Okay. So I will note that what I know specifically about this property, because I'll be honest, if there is a subdivision plan that's in process for this, there is a lot of information that's still in process, and it hasn't been. There's a lot of items that still need to be finished on this file and approved on this file before it's fully able to go ahead. Any of the property that's being sold is being sold subject to shoot, I forget exactly how it says. I know this because I am a realtor, so I'm able to access a lot of that information. But it's I forget exactly what the subject is, but it hasn't fully been, they haven't gotten all of their permits finalized with Modi. So there's still a lot of pieces in there that are still being worked through. Landon, I see your hands up. So do you want to go ahead and comment as well? And yeah, sorry, and I'll agree. Yeah, there is a loophole there, but yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so the last town hall in November, I remember, you know, many of the same concerns that are passing through everybody in the neighborhood right now were relevant then. And the comments from the SCRD is that it hasn't crossed their desks yet. So it's not their responsibility until Modi has a plan with them, Ministry of Environment has a plan with them, yet this developer is allowed to create roads, grade his property, trench around his septic, prepare it. And the slide that you showed earlier actually shows that permit application, he should be applying to the SCRD at the exact same time that he's applying to Modi, yet he's allowed to carry on. SCRD is not enforcing anything because it's all being called logging activity. Yet it's not logging activity because he's selling properties. That's where the money is coming from for him. It's not from selling the wood, which first logging truck actually left there today, which we haven't seen previously. So if we're wondering where he's making money from, it's from selling his properties, which he does not have a development permit from. So where is the SCRD in this to enforce, hey, you're building roads, you're grading properties. It's just not past our table yet. But the SCRD needs to step up and enforce this. He does not have a development permit and he's developing.
Okay. So, so it's like I said before, it is a concurrent process. And what I understand, the update that I have that I didn't have in November at the town hall is that there are a number of issues that are still outstanding with Modi, and the SCRD is aware of those. And they are still working through a few things with him at the same time. So there's certainly whoever, oh, Andy, I'm just going to mute you, okay? There we go. Okay. So they have processes that they're working through. They're certainly aware of the issues with this property. There's a lot of processes that still need to happen, a lot of check boxes that still need to be clicked off. And the regional or the rural directors, we have a meeting on a quarterly meeting with the Ministry of Transportation, and this is one of the ones that's on my list, and that's upcoming in the next week or so. So I'm hoping to have more updates for you soon. I'm sorry I don't have more right now, that specific property, I think let's come back to it outside of this meeting. I really wanted to keep this very broad on this meeting about process and what things are going through. And I understand there's a lot of angst about a couple of developments that in the community and in Half Moon Bay especially, but this is why I wanted to do the overbroad of like, this is what the process is. And yeah, there's a couple of things that are a little bit questionable going on right now.
Yeah, so speaking as properties in general, developments in general, how are they allowed to get to the phase where roads are in place, properties are being graded, and a septic is being prepared without the district stepping in because there is no development permit yet? And just because processes are underway, they have not been issued. Permits have not been issued. So work should not be proceeding and the property should not be selling. That is our issue, whether it's Bayview Hills or any development in Half Moon Bay or the Sunshine Coast. If the SCRD will not enforce something until, the development permit has to be issued before work can start. It's as simple as that. And the SCRD needs to be the ones to enforce that.
But the Ministry of Transportation is the one that approves the subdivision, not the SCRD. We work with them, and that's not, we issue the building permits. We don't issue, if it's a development permit area around rock zones, riparian areas that's already been indicated within the OCP and the zoning bylaws. That's where we have to, well, that's the part, they are still working through that. And I understand your frustration, especially knowing, and I heard that back in November as well. But this is one that
Lori, this is not Modi's responsibility at this point. When it is a DPA zone 2A and he has bulldozed over a creek, that is a development permit area and he has gone right over a creek. And then what I hear from the SCRD and what I hear from you is it's not on our table yet. It is in fact on your table. Sorry, on the planning department's table.
okay. And as an elected, it hasn't come in front of me as an elected on an agenda or anything. And I've brought it up with staff because I've heard from the community. Len, I see your hand.
Yes, Lori, I thought maybe I could help here because we have a similar issue here.
Perfect.
If there is a DPA area, the only way you can stop the activity is to put in a bylaw complaint, and the bylaw officer will investigate and stop them. And if they don't stop, a fine will be issued. We are not a police force, so we will not investigate unless a resident puts in a complaint. The bylaw complaints are anonymous unless it goes to court, but the whole process is outlined on the SCRD website. And like I say, I was faced with a similar issue in the last 3 weeks. The other thing is that there is the tree cutting bylaw or law is only directly related to what the provincial government has authorized us to put in place. And the tree cutting bylaw we're only allowed to put in tree cutting bylaws specifically where there's DPAs that the provincial government has outlined as needed to be existing. So, but I believe we're talking about here, and I'm not familiar with the issue, of course, so I could be entirely wrong, but I believe we're talking about cutting too close to a creek within 30 meters. And if that's occurring and a bylaw complaint goes in, then a bylaw officer will respond and stop it. And if it isn't stopped, the fine will be as under our bylaw policy. Other than that, though, a person can merrily cut trees down on their private property outside that DPA and build roads and do whatever they want. And that even extends to if there is a subdivision and they still own all the lots, it's still theirs. So they can merrily cut trees down as well, as long as they are not within predefined DPA that is on the SCRD website. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Len. I appreciate that. And I know it is a frustrating process, especially with this property and the neighboring residents. I'm gonna move through the question with the raised hands first, and then I'll go to the questions in chat. So next up I have Kim D.
Yeah, sorry, trying to unmute. Sorry, my picture's not here, but I'm holding my grandbaby.
Oh, congratulations.
So thanks for your presentation, Lori, and thanks, Len. I think your bylaw comment was helpful, but what I'm hearing, correct me if I'm wrong, is that you showed us a slide that said the process should be concurrent, SCRD and MODI at the same time. But in this case at Bayview that we're talking about, that's not what's happening, and there's nothing that SCRD can do about it?
No, there is, without getting too much into the specifics of this certain one, because it's still at the staff level, it's not at the elected level yet with this. So they're working through a number of issues with the Ministry of Transportation and some with the regional district as well. So this is, and I know it's a complicated one that was the complication.
Lori, excuse me, to help you out here. I mean, I know it's a complicated issue. We're just trying to get some answers.
Yep.
So you can't give them to us. So who on staff can give them to us?
I would go to the planning department. Is your
Sorry, who on the planning department, Lori?
So start with if we can circle, okay, so what I'm gonna offer is for anybody who is specifically concerned about the Bayview Heights and wanting to know where to put their information to, if you could just send me a private message in the chat, just send it just to me as the host with your email address, and just say like Bayview and then your email address, and we'll circle back and talk more about that one specifically off of this one, because I know that one is complicated. It's really upsetting for the residents in this area, and so I do want to deal with that one separately rather than getting too much into it right now in details of a meeting that essentially is going to be very public later. So
can you just give me a name in the planning department, Lori?
I'm not at this point, Kim, off of the top of my head, I do not know.
Maybe you could find that out and email it to those of us who've asked these questions.
Yes.
That'd be great. Thanks.
That's why I'm saying if you can make sure that you email me what you need to know, and just send it in a private message, not to everyone, just to me, and I'll circle back with you after. I'm saving the chat, so I'll make sure that I have all of those information saved, and we'll circle back and talk about that one specifically off of a public meeting. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Yep, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, Kim, I'm going to lower your hand. Okay, Andy Jones Cox.
Hi, Laurie. Thanks very much for taking the question. I actually put this question into the chat right at the start of your presentation, so it was a bit sort of relevant there. But just as a bit of background, as I think you know, Laurie, this relates to the potential development in the Truman Road area. And we look across the bay at the big scar on the hillside above Cooper's Green and imagine that that might be the same 5 of whatever number of years down the road in our neighborhood with the same things going on. So it's very worrying that we don't go down that road, that kind of road. Mm-hmm. And the very first things that we're seeing are a little bit worrying from the SCRD's activity, to be honest. So my question was, can a non-owner make an application to the SCRD for subdivision based on a prospective purchase of the property, which is what is happening? And as I understand, based on my discussion with several people from different areas, this should not be happening. If the SCRD receives such an application, will it start to process it or to advise the applicant about their application, which I believe is happening and I believe should not be? And I guess the third question, which I didn't get a chance to put in there, was, and should the public not have access to any application that's submitted? And we don't, and we don't understand why not. As I understand from talking with people in other jurisdictions, an application submitted should be accessible to the public to view at the district hall without any questions other than making an appointment. So maybe you could sort of address those things. Thank you.
Okay. And so if the applicant to for a subdivision is, so I'm gonna bring it back to the broad terms and tell you what I know, and with some opinion, is if an applicant, so a property owner or their agent, a designated agent for them, can make an application to subdivide a property. So for a property that is in the midst of sale, if it is, and I'm going to preface with this specific one that you're speaking about. I don't know who the applicant actually is because I haven't seen it yet. So that one's a little bit of a, it's still a question mark for me. And what I do know is that yes, the regional district is working with the applicant on the part of the property. It's not clear to me, and probably because of where it is in the purchase, it's probably being held very confidential. And I'm challenging staff a little bit on it too, to be honest, because if there's an application that's in process, yes, we should know who it is. We should know what's going through and what's happening. And it's not clear immediately to me in the questions I've asked who actually the applicant is. So but this is one I'm still asking questions on staff over, and I'll be in the regional district office tomorrow and ask more questions then too. Go ahead, Andy.
Yes, it's just, is it really relevant who the applicant is? Should the applicant not be the property owner, period? Is that not the case?
It can be the property owner, or it could be an agent designated by the property owner.
Oh, so the property owner could designate a prospective buyer as their agent.
They could.
Okay.
So that is, it doesn't necessarily need to. So yes, so you might have a property owner and they might hire a project coordinator to look after a subdivision of a property. They just want to own the land and be in part of the profits. They don't want to have to deal, they want the agent to deal with all of the, and we see this from everything from small subdivisions to larger ones. So it could be just sometimes people just don't want to deal with it. And this one is a little bit complicated because it is a purchase that's going through it. Like it's one that is in process. So it's not, it's not immediately clear, and some items might be being held confidential because they may be subject to a confidential contract of purchase and sale right now. So, so yeah, so don't worry, I'm on this one too, like a little bit like a dog with a bone, Andy. I'm curious because
thank you, Laurie.
Yeah, because it's a big change for your neighborhood. Yeah.
Well, maybe it is.
Maybe not.
I think that's a question, isn't it? It's not like it is, but it could be.
It could be.
Yes.
We have a very long process to go through. And
it does worry me. It does worry me that the planning department thinks it is, and I think it's only could be a future development.
It could or it could not. I mean, I know the sign is there, and it's not always necessary to be scared of a sign, but it's certainly And feel free. The other thing I meant to answer that mention this earlier is with we do have we do ask that any applicants that do have the an application or looking at subdividing, that they post a sign on the property, and it has their contact details, the planning department's contact details right on it. So you can always contact those people too for more information. And Andy will challenge me on that too. I know he will. Yeah.
Yeah, that clearly hasn't happened in some of the other subdivides, right? Like,
Yeah.
so you know, having a sign up where everybody would know and see what the subdivision plans are, what the people could go and look for the public meetings and whatnot is not listed in some of the sites that have been subdivided or applications for subdivides. That's all.
Yeah. And yeah, I just had something pop up. Yeah, Jason, and I understand that. And if the sign is an SCRD requirement if the property is going to be going through an OCP or a bylaw amendment process, and that's, you know, when the sign has to very clearly be posted with the changes as well. Okay, I'm going to go over to Ellen, and then Bill, you're after Ellen.
And thank you, Lori.
You're welcome, Jason.
Thanks, Lori. I posed this question in the chat as well, but I'm really wondering, I've heard a lot about process, and I understand it's complicated. I understand there's different levels making different decisions. What I'm really concerned about is who is assessing the environmental impact of any and all of these projects, because I don't mean somebody buying a lot on red roofs and taking down 3 trees or 10 or whatever to build their home. These are big developments, and there are impacts. I mean, we saw that on our road in November. We see what happens in cities like Kelowna when people build so close to the forest that their houses burn down. Like, I'm concerned that, from what I heard from your presentation, the word environmental assessment did not come up once. You talked about water flows, which, yes, that's part of it, but that's only one small part of it. I'm just wondering what conversations you're having at the district level, or you're aware that the province is having, and maybe this is a Nicholas Lyon's question more than, as well as yours, to try and bring some more forethought to these developments that are, there's one above Cove Beach now, there's this one at Bayview Glen now, I've just heard about one on Truman. These are going to make a big change to our environment. They're going to affect climate, they're going to affect water flows, they're going to affect risk of fire. Who's assessing that, and what can we do if nobody is doing it?
Ryan, were you waving to speak, or?
No, I wasn't able to speak, but I just got tuning in. Like, well, the fire part is me. It does come across my desk internally, so I get to be part of some of the internal analysis that Director Pratt was talking about. Other than that, though, the only other thing I have is, for maybe if I can help Lori, planning has a planning at scrd.ca a generic email you can send it, and they'll put it to the right person. So even if you have a question, you can send it to planning at scrd.ca, and it should go right to, and an officer will pick it up and put it to the right direction for your questions.
That's not the answer I'm looking for. Sorry. So I'm asking Lori, you know, what discussion is going on at our elected representative level about taking planning to the point where we are looking at these potential impacts before we give approvals to them. And in fact, it sounds like we haven't given approvals to Bayview Hills, and they're still marching merrily along anyhow. But what, if not now, when? Really? I mean, look at the year we've all just been through. I guess I'd like to know if there is a conversation going on at the elected representative level about the need, especially from your presentation, my impression was that it was very much an urban planning approach, which we're not urban here in Half Moon Bay. We're surrounded by a forest and streams and so on. So I guess that's what I would like to know is what's your thinking on that?
Okay. Well, thanks, Ellen. And also thank you, Ryan. Yeah, Ryan, it's so great to have our fire chief here. So thanks, Ryan. And any question can go to planning at scrd.ca. The specific ones around the one development, though, I wanted to gather them in one spot. So because I know there's some specific questions, but in regards to the environmental piece, yeah, you know what, honestly, and I can tell you that the rest of my directors would more or less agree with me, but it's going to be opinion, is we don't talk about it. We haven't thought about it enough over the years. And we're now in a point where with climate change, with atmospheric rivers, with heat domes, we're seeing more and more of a need to make sure that's integrated. So, you know, so there's everything that we're doing from our emergency services team is doing a lot of work with FireSmart and a lot of work with our fire departments on making sure that they're properly trained and they're getting ready, and we're looking at that emergency planning piece. Is Sunshine Coast Regional District handles emergency planning, so that's everything from fires to water, floods, name it. And apparently COVID a little bit too. So when it comes to the environmental piece, I think with what happened in 2021 in British Columbia was a huge wake-up call to everyone that we haven't done enough overall, and we need to have more being done. The regional district strategic plan, we have at the core that everything that we do, every decision we make, we're going to make it with that through the lens of climate change. Like, what does this mean in the way of greenhouse gases? What does this mean for densification? What does this mean for urban sprawl in rural areas and footprints and you know, our carbon footprints? So we've definitely put it at the core of our strategic plan. I know we think about it keenly about how things are going to affect, and you know, I think about how many road washouts we've already had, not just in Half Moon Bay, but the whole Sunshine Coast. We've had a lot of issues in the last couple of years, not just in November, but you know, you even see the damage happening on our main infrastructure. So it's definitely something, whenever we can talk to a minister at the provincial or the federal level, or MP or MLA, these are always things that we bring up to them, and asking for, you know, essentially more help to be able to help us with some of these issues too. So it's we do need a little bit more teeth in some of our zoning and our OCPs around that. We need to, if you think about, for example, the zoning bylaw, how long ago, you know, our zoning bylaws were adopted, you know, a long time ago. And so we didn't see a lot of these effects of these large water events that we've been seeing recently. We haven't had the same concerns of fire. Like the Half Moon Bay OCP was adopted in 2014, and you think about the fire that was on the other side of the ridge that was threatening to come over to us was in 2015, you know, and it's only gotten more and more complicated since then. So we do think about them. We do talk about them. I know Director McMahon, she sits on the BC Climate Caucus, and she's you know, she's very active with them as well, and bringing back information about what other jurisdictions are doing as well. Looking at ways of updating the zoning to make it more climate resilient. So that's part of that too. Does that help, Ellen?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's a good summary, I'm assuming, of where the conversation is at. It just feels to me there's some urgency, and particularly right in this community with these potentially these two developments already proceeding, and it sounds like another one that that is potential around Truman. It just feels to me those are perfect opportunities to try and apply a lens of how can we be precautionary in how we're providing our or allowing permits. Yeah.
Thanks,
Thanks.
Ellen. Bill, over to you, and then Peter. Oh, Bill, you're on mute right now. Here, I'm going to. No, you're muted on the screen. You have to unmute yourself. There we go. You're unmuted. Okay.
Thank you. I have a couple of easy questions there. My first comment might be, I think our SCRD needs to be bigger, more people, because right now you have so many factions. You have the SCRD controlling building, you have MOTI controlling the road, and you have fisheries and oceans controlling the drainage and everything else that's going into the ocean. In 2018, I took pictures. It was coming off of Bayview down into Kitchen Creek and down into the ocean, and I got a hold of fisheries and oceans because I was told no one else could do anything about it, and they've been monitoring it ever since. But from what I can see, the fines must not be high enough, because I've been in surveying and engineering, and they just pay the fines and go on their merry way because it's worth the money to them. So my point would be is that SCRD needs to be whatever it takes. I mean, if you have to become a city, you have progress to control progress, because you need more control over what's happening. Because right now it's just by too many different factions. But anyway, sorry that I got off my own topic there. We've owned property on the coast. It's been our family since 1946 on Red Roost Road, and we're ready to build on our vacant property. And this all concerns me because I saw this coming down my property in 2018. And it concerns me that these are strata lots as well, because that allows the developer to relax the bylaws like setbacks and things like that. So I mean, that's like they're strata title lots. They're not freehold as to speak. But anyway, that's a different topic again. But are you talking about the Bayview as the whole Bayview, all 72 acres, or the piece near Cooper's Green is the 27 acres? Are they going to develop the 45 acres, which is the larger piece south of Priestland Road?
So I really want to stay away from too much more of the specifics around specific developments. I'd like to take that piece offline because this is going to be made very, so I'm talking like general, broader subdivision process and jurisdictional overlaps tonight. So we've gotten a little bit into a couple of the developments that are currently happening. I'm trying to keep it fairly broad.
I understand. That's why I'm trying to get it out quickly. I mean, can we send, if someone sends me an email, because I've been trying to get hold of your planners for about 3 months or 3 weeks now.
Okay.
And I've sent emails and phone calls just to do my building.
Okay.
And I have, because they're working Monday, Wednesday, Fridays, I believe.
Yeah. In the office. So if you can, if it's specific about the Bayview Hills,
That's
send me.
where our property is. Yes.
Oh, okay. So just send me a private message in the chat, and we'll circle back to it later, Bill. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, but I'm serious about the SCRD needs to become bigger.
Okay. Well, that's a whole other conversation, Bill. There's some people that would argue and say that it needs to get smaller and have less jurisdiction.
You need City Hall, your infrastructure. You've seen it. It's been proven. If your infrastructure doesn't keep up to your development, it's caused disaster after disaster after disaster. And when you're buffering the ocean like that, you're just asking to kill everything.
Yeah.
You know how much silt it takes to kill a fish? Not much.
No. And I hear you. And yeah, that's maybe another conversation about regional districts and their challenges and what can be done. So
yeah. Well, that's why we want to get a build up there so we can be up there full time.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of the place.
Yeah. I did want to make a note. Somebody had put this in the chat, and I just wanted to also I wanted to highlight it, that any environmental assessment and those kind of environmental concerns, yes, they do fall under the provincial ministry, depending on they do fall under the provincial umbrella. So a lot of those should go to the MLA, and our president of the Half Moon Bay Community Association has also pointed out that the community association is hosting a town hall that the MLA and the MP will be at. So any questions about environment are best put to them at that meeting. So and that is on April the 6th. And I saw Linda put the information in the chat. Maybe we'll make sure, Linda, if you put it in again later too, please. Okay, and next up, I'm going to go to Peter.
Hi, Laurie. Thank you.
Good to see you, Peter.
Likewise. Sort of a two-part question. Just first, the confirmation. I think I heard you say that there is a formal review underway of bylaw 310, which covers the community plan for a number of the areas, including Area B. Am I correct?
Yeah, so bylaw 310 is the zoning bylaw that regulates the land use for areas B, D, E, and F. And it's actually been under bylaw 310 review, and the bylaw 310 update has been in process since before I was elected in 2018. So it's been a long process. I understand from staff that there will be an update that will be seen later this year. So I'm not quite sure if any of my other rural directors have a memory of when it might be coming up. I am not sure if we have a definite date yet. But yeah, so, and that's around the, oh, Donna, there you are.
Yeah, I think we're going to see it next month.
Okay.
The draft coming to us to be followed by a public information meeting, and then a reading, and then a public hearing.
Perfect. Thank you, Donna. And so that'll likely come to the Planning and Community Development Committee meeting then in April, which is usually the second Thursday in April.
Okay, so that answers my second question. So thanks, Donna, because my next question is going to be, where are we at about public meetings or public hearings? So Donna's answered that there in the background. So to be honest, you know, I've only lived here for about 3-4 years, but this is the first I've been aware that this is going on.
Okay.
So, okay, thank you very much.
It's a long process. The consolidated bylaw is a couple of 100 pages long. So it's and it deals, like I said, I think I mentioned it, like it deals with everything from whether or not you can have roosters and rabbits to whether or not you can have a campground, you know, so there's a lot of information in one bylaw.
My one comment then would be, there's a whole lot more serious stuff about roosters and rabbits that isn't being covered by the sound of what's going on in our neighbors across the bay. You know, roosters and rabbits are the least thing to be worried about.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Peter. I'm gonna lower your hands. Okay, so I don't have any more electronic hands up. And I know the chat has been very prolific, and I am, just bear with me. Oh, I'll go to Angela next. Angela, I see your electronic hand if you'd like to go ahead.
Thank you very much. I have two questions that I had put down in chat.
Okay.
One has to do with if there is a subdivision being planned where, for example, stormwater would have an impact in a neighboring jurisdiction. So for example, either in rural area into the town of Gibson's, or vice versa, perhaps from the town or the district into the rural area. does the other jurisdiction get notified of that in writing, that could happen? Or that would happen?
That's a really interesting question, Angela, and that's one that what I there's okay, so there's what actually happens and there's what is spelled out anywhere. Okay. So what is spelled out anywhere is that it's not I couldn't find anything that actually says that it would be referred. But I do know that it's very practically, it is referred. Our planning departments and our infrastructure departments across the governments on the coast work very closely together. So I know that they talk back and forth about what's going on, especially items that are happening in those fringe or those overlap areas. And that's also another one of those questions that we have on the back burner to continue to advocate for with Modi, is making sure that does happen. From our understanding, Modi does do that, but as I've said, I personally haven't found any information. If one of my other directors has documentation of that somewhere, I'd like to see it. I haven't found anything on it, but usually, like, our hope is that they do, because we've certainly seen a lot of, we've seen the questions come up ourselves, and we've seen that happen. So yeah, I understand the concern, and water doesn't know the boundary, right? So I hear the question, I hear your concern, and it's definitely something that I know Director McMahon has spoken about. Sorry, Donna, I keep on bringing you up, but Donna's one who she's keenly aware of this, and she's I know I've heard her speak on this a number of times. So, and stormwater management is not well handled. As I said earlier, it's not well handled in any rural area of British Columbia at all. And it's really, it's very overwhelming for Modi to look at it at all. So,
and it's definitely a topic that needs to be addressed.
Yes,
with these climate events that we're having, which sort of leads me into my other question. Somebody earlier spoke about the effects on salmon. And in that case, that's a federal jurisdiction. You would call the observe, record, and report line.
Yes.
So if somebody saw something being deposited, whether it's sediment or something, toxic chemical, whatever, that's the line that you would contact. If it's in a creek that's higher than where the salmon are, but possibly could be trout bearing, or not, then you call the provincial line. You would call the RAP line, which is report all polluters and poachers. And so if people are actually seeing, an excavator going through a creek that's a gazetted creek, I would urge those people to contact the RAP line and make those calls themselves. And my question to you would be then, does the SCRD, do they get notified when there's a call that comes into either the federal government, to the ORR, or to the provincial level from the RAP line? Do you get notified of those calls?
It depends on what the jurisdiction is. And Donna, I see your hand up. Maybe you can help me with this. Angela, I'm going to have to look into that a little bit more on what the process is, because I can tell you, I know that if there is a polluter, so for example, if it is a garbage dump site up in the woods, I do know that we get notified about those because I've asked about it before, because I've found them before and gone through that process. But the other ones I'm not sure. Donna, I see your hand up, so I'm going to go to you if that's okay.
Sure. I'm not actually sure what the answer to that question is. I suspect in most cases, no, we are not informed when the province is sent a complaint. And when it comes to the interjurisdictional thing, you would think that because we're next door neighbors, we tell each other what we're doing, but that unfortunately is not necessarily the case. Like the town of Gibson's passed their stormwater management plan, and it certainly never came to the SCRD table. Now,
No.
whether staff talk to each other or not is a different question, but it certainly didn't come up at the elected level. And similarly, you know, all the way up the stream, there are people who are making decisions and none of them are talking to each other. I've got a gravel mine and they're under the Mining Act. They're legislated there. They do stuff. They don't tell us. Yeah. Private property owners do things. The town has done things, you know, and on it goes. And it's, we can't continue this way.
Yeah.
I have a whole rant about it. You can read my rants on my website.
Everythingelphinstone.ca.
Thank
And
you very much.
yeah, and Donna has a great point, is, you know, there's a lot of times that it's being dealt with at the staff level and it never reaches the elected level, or we might not know about it, or you know, there's already a process, and because we're the policy, we're the decision makers, we set the budget and that kind of thing. So a lot of the daily operational things we never know about. So so sometimes we'll get somebody from the community telling us something that's going on or asking us, and we have to go and we have to dig and find out that information. Next up, I've got Alistair.
Hello, Laurie. There's a bunch of questions in the chat, really kind of referring to, you know, who's responsible for the environmental aspects. And I guess I'm still a little unclear. Like the official community plan kind of regulates kind of land use planning and zoning, what land can be used for, and kind of how, and that kind of informs our bylaws. There's a lot in the official community plan about kind of environmental aspects, kind of considerations for zoning and land use. As I read that, I always had the impression that the OCP and our bylaws that kind of come out of the community plan are kind of the things that enforce those environmental aspects. And maybe you don't have all of the controls that you need. Len kind of touched on that things like development permit areas can only be used for certain things. So I'm kind of curious, maybe the SCRD have the tools, but the community plan doesn't kind of meet the needs of what some of the community are asking for. And that I'm just trying to figure out what the gap is there. I don't want people to feel like they end up bouncing between provincial and regional kind of government and kind of not really knowing who has the authority to manage those things. I know that's really what your session was about today. And I feel like in some ways I'm still not sure if the OCP, you know, really talks about how the environment should be protected in land use zoning, and our bylaws can enforce the community plan. Don't we have some of those tools already, or is it just that the community plan needs to be revised? There's a bunch of questions for you.
Oh yeah, no, and it's great, Alistair. That's fantastic, and thank you so much, and thank you for submitting questions ahead of time too. And wow, it's almost 2 hours now. We've gotten up some great conversation. You know what? Yeah, there's in some cases, our land use zoning and our OCP, they don't go far enough, you know, and I can say that for you know, OCPs are visionary documents. And, you know, in 2014, were we expecting to be in a housing crisis the way we are now in 2022? Were we expecting to be worried about drying up and burning up in the summer and floating away in the winter? Like, you know, there's some of these issues that you know, that we need to take another look at. So for Half Moon Bay specific about the official community plan, maybe it is time to take a look at that again and say, okay, does this still fit the needs? Is this still, you know, now that we've had all of these areas already built up, maybe it's time that we look at increasing the areas of where we need to have development permit areas, where we need to have, we need to be protecting more creek beds and looking at that. So, and it's one of the difficulties in a rural area is regional districts don't have enough power to do a lot of these things. It's held provincially and or federally in some cases. We have to, we tend to be kind of reactionary to things that are going on, and we write the bylaws or we update the bylaws to react sometimes to how things are going on. But in some cases, we don't have the ability to do these things through legislation because we're so siloed in what we can do. For the environmental piece, we don't think governments have not thought about it enough. You know, through their, whether or not it was their land use planning or their official community plans or just how they've done their decision making or at all, you know, not making it a priority, not you know, being more focused on that. And we're seeing the effects of those, or the start of those effects, or middle of those effects now. So yeah, it's it depends on issue by issue too, because in some cases something may be under the jurisdiction of the regional district, it may be under the jurisdiction of the Ministry of Environment, it might be under the Ministry of Transportation, but in some cases it may even, you know, be under a federal ministry like Ministry of Fisheries. So I know that's not really a great answer, Alistair. To me, it becomes a much more philosophical policy piece of what should have been in place to stop some of this stuff from happening or to mitigate these things that are happening now. So it's kind of about playing a little bit of catch up after.
Yeah. Just for me, it's trying to understand, is it just the fact that our community plan doesn't maybe kind of meet some of the community's needs, or is it more that the SCRD have restrictions in terms of some of the things they're able to kind of manage and kind of enforce, and that's kind of really hard to know without talking to staff and people that are really legislative experts that understand, you know, what regional districts are allowed to do and not do kind of stuff. So it's
well, and
yeah.
it depends on regional district to regional district as well, because it depends on what you've agreed to provide as services to the community, what the community wants for services,
Right.
what you tax for. You know, if the community wanted us to start an environmental watchdog service, let's just call it that, where that's a service that only looks after the environmental side of every project, and we have that in a way a little bit with a couple of you know, kind of like a sustainability coordinator and a couple of other positions. But if we wanted to actually make it a line item and tax for it then and provide it as a service, I mean, that's certainly an option, but that needs to go to a public decision. That's not something that we would answer at the board level. That's something that we would have to put out to public opinion, because then it would be establishing a new service.
I have a quick follow-on question, if I can quickly steal another minute or two. I think the SCRD is hiring some fire smart officers. I think they're hiring some staff specifically for that. And it's interesting because, you know, there's going to be different perspectives on this, and I'll give Ryan opportunity to answer some questions maybe. You know, there are different perspectives. You know, I've heard developers say, well, we're going to cut all the trees down so that there's no fire danger. And I'm kind of like, well, yeah, I guess that's true. But a lot of people moved here for the trees. And it's kind of like, well, how do you balance those things? And I you know, what's the SCRD strategy there too as well? Obviously the intent isn't to cut all the trees down the whole Sunshine Coast. I get that, but it's kind of where is the balance? You know, is it thinning out brush and kind of, you know, there's different questions in there in terms of what developers are allowed to do. I'm not really talking about that. It's more what the regional district and from a fire safety perspective is the right answer.
Okay, Ryan, do you want to, because this is your,
Sure.
not me.
Yeah, no, okay, this is well, I can discuss in this. Yeah, the Fire Smart coordinators have been retained, and they are available to the communities of the Sunshine Coast Regional District. The intent is for us to be able to provide in the fire smarting is to be able to provide us information to you on how to protect your property in case of a forest fire encroaching in on to our area. The cutting down all the trees to protect the environment is not the right answer. Possibly in some areas, keeping all the trees, it might not be the right fire safe answer, but it depends on the area, how close it is to urban interface, so on and so forth. So there's a lot of scalability there. But the great news about the Fire Smart coordinators is now they're available to us and available to our community, and they'll be able to educate you as homeowners to be able to fire smart your properties in order to protect them in case of an interface fire. The BC Wildfire also has a plan called the Risk Reduction Plan, which then borders some of our high risk areas. That's also going to be coming into place. So there is a lot of things coming in the background for this. But yeah, when developers want to clear all the trees, maximize profits, so on and so forth, that's not fire smarting. Fire Smart actually has a specific program and ways to do it. But there is a lot of communication in I can speak on the fire side of it for the environment, the wildfire, talking to the Sunshine Coast Regional District, a lot of communication. And, you know, as the province tries to protect and have their rules, the Sunshine Coast Regional District has a lot of things in place to enforce rules of the government, the Ministry of Environment, for the creeks and the DFO, and assisting them with bylaw. And we all know the rules. And even when it comes to building, BC is in place, and we have building officials to keep those regulations in place, and so on and so forth. So a lot the same to do with fire as well. And we try to work with the province, even though we're within our boundaries of the regional district, so that we're planning together as well. Does that help, Alistair?
Yeah, no, that's great. I think I had a fair sense. I had heard people confused about it, and I didn't really know much about it. So I was just teeing you up to answer questions that I knew other people had.
Yeah, and anybody can email me and if they want to inquire about the fire smarting, and I can point you in the right direction and set you up with the coordinators. But they have begun their work now for locally, for within our district boundaries. So if you need more information about that, we can take it offline too, if people are wanting to upgrade their properties.
Thank you for that, Ryan. I just completely had a bit of a dog meltdown here, so my apologies for any weirdness in the background, but long story short, my computer is now covered in water. So I'm really hoping we can make it through a few more minutes here. Len, I saw your hand up. Did you want to add anything to the Fire Smart?
My computer's a little slow responding to my button. Yes, Ryan is absolutely right. And we have an example of fire smarting the side of the road up in Egmont right now. This particular one was financed by the province, but they didn't cut the trees down at all. They trimmed them up to a certain height. They took some of the smaller ones out so that they wouldn't catch on fire. And it actually was, to my way of thinking, a very positive experience for everybody. The trees remain, they look the same, they're going to grow. The tourists are going to drive up the Egmont Road and still see the forest. And so the takeaway for me was it is possible to fire smart and do it so the environment is not affected at all. And I thought that was cool.
Okay, thanks. Dog is still losing her mind, so I really hope that I can still get a few more minutes in with everyone. My apologies for that. you know, life with kids and pets. You got to love that. Okay, Derek, and then I have somebody who's in here as user. Go ahead, Derek.
Thank you, Laurie. We're all obviously kind of struggling with what the best way to control environmentally responsible design. And I sent a question in by email. I really think that development permits are the strongest vehicle. And my question was, should we be considering extending development permit areas from what we have right now to cover all of the residential areas in Half Moon Bay? And I'm not just, I'm talking about subdivisions rather than single family properties, although I am concerned recently what I've seen with some of the clearing that has been going on single family lots without any intention of anybody building anything. But my question is about amending the OCP to put development permits in place for all residential lands in Half Moon Bay. And I think that the strength that the regional district has with development permits is that we can ask for anything to substantiate the approval of a development permit. And there are environmental consultants out there that all developers work with, and lots of very, very good people that can bring the answers to the table in order to get the approvals in place.
Derek, yes, and I got your question, and it was one I was trying to weave in, and it's that bigger question around the you know, the whole OCP and the land use planning and looking at, okay, where else, what does need to be protected and what aren't we protecting now, and as I was saying earlier, like, it's a larger community conversation. So, and it's a long process to do an OCP as well. So, but, you know, if we've got gaps there, you know, we're in a different way of life than what we were 10 years ago. So, you know, these are things as the community builds out and we see the issues that we have, you know, like what do we need to do to you know, to address those changes. So yeah, it's just, it becomes a process. I am really, really sorry. I know that's as annoying as heck, but with the dog, sorry about that, everyone. Sorry, Derek. I know it's yeah, no, it's hard. It's a long process, but yeah, definitely it is something that we can look at, and I'll take that question back to staff because I've certainly made note of it because I was curious of that myself. You know, what can we do?
Well, it's just my understanding that Bayview Heights, if it didn't have a water course going through it, it would not have required a development permit.
For the actual, because we only have development permit areas, but because there's a development permit area, but there's also the other pieces around what they're changing to get the subdivision or you know, the other pieces that they're doing there too. So there's a lot with that one property, and talking about the one of the other things I've heard about, you know, some of these development permit areas and the riparian areas is that in a lot of cases, they're not being, they may have been, they may not have been creeks, they may have just been dry stream beds before, like when they were mapped out, and maybe they no longer are. So it's something that I've made note of, and I'm going to take back to staff. Definitely.
Thank you.
Next up, was that all, Derek? I know, I'm sorry, that wasn't, I know that's not the answer you're looking for in this time, but I've got your email and we'll swing back. So, okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next up I have user. You just user with your electronic hand up.
Yes, Lori, I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay,
I'm
great.
sure you can hear me and my dog right now.
Yes, I understand. I understand the computer problem because I'm working on a borrowed computer right now, so that's why it says user. My name is Ron Johnston. I used to have the Garden Bay Hotel. Yeah.
Hi, Ron.
Hi there. How are you?
Oh, good. How are you?
Great. Thanks for all the hard work you're doing. I now live in Half Moon Bay. Well, I've had this place for probably 35 years, and I'm directly below the proposed Truman development. And I can see problems on everything from roads. I traveled that road back and forth to the pub for 30 years from here. And it is no better than it was 30 years ago, other than probably the bypass. If we drive from, let's say from Seashell to Trout Lake, the road gets an F. And I'm grading things from A being the best, the old school days, and F being a failure. We definitely have a failure on the roads. We definitely have a failure on water. We definitely have a failure, and I could go through each and every item that you've gone through, and the highest I could score was probably a D or an E. I think we have a lot more work to do on infrastructure before we look at things. Look at West Vancouver. Let's go for a bus ride with a bunch of people sometime and look at the infill that there's been on this coast in the last 40 years. Our infrastructure hasn't been able to keep up to it. We haven't kept up to it. We can't afford to keep up to it. So looking at bringing more, I spoke to my neighbors the other day who had a very loud, whiny, barky dog. Thank you. I spoke to them the other day, a couple of days ago, and they thought it would be wonderful because we could have this development up here on Truman, and it would be a potential to have low-cost housing. To me, most folks that need low-cost housing probably don't have vehicles, probably can't pay for insurance on vehicles. How would they get back and forth to Seashell for appointments, etc.? So there's a lot of misunderstanding as to where development should go and shouldn't go and how it should be done. I think we're completely overwhelmed at our small government level. The poor people, if you're trying to go in even to get a building permit, they're overwhelmed. So just my comments from someone who's lived here for the last and been in business for the last 40, 45 years. So.
Thanks, Ron. I appreciate that. And it's good to hear your voice, even though I haven't seen you in forever, but it's, yeah, I hear you on the, I hear you on a lot, and well, I hear you on everything, and I understand the grading process. You know, and that's where something like a regional growth strategy, where we're looking at the entire coast, including the municipalities and the SIGD and Squamish lands, and really looking at what we want to look and be as a coast, you know, as and what we need. And then with that regional growth strategy, because it's that strategic plan, we're then looking at when we go to the province and say, look, you know, you need to help support us more with this because we're all on the same page. And part of the problem is, you know, holding the proper accountable people to the fire. And sometimes that's your locally elected. So the ones you have here at the SCRD, or in other cases, you know, it's your MLA or your member of parliament. And, you know, we've got a lot. We've got a lot of work to do. We need to be working together. We're and not infighting. The last thing any of our residents needs is any of the directors infighting. And I'll say, you know, even though we disagree about a number of things, we can still collaborate and work together at the regional district and amongst the other governments on the coast. So, you know, we got a lot to work to do, Ron, and that's I can't, you know, we're working towards some things like with the water piece, you know, drilling. We broke ground on Church Road last week, finally, after waiting for provincial approvals forever. We've got that moving forward, as well as we're investigating other water sources. That's already in process. So we're not waiting for one to come online. We're still continuing to do more that way, advocating for the road, trying to meet as directors. We meet with the Ministry of Transportation a couple of, well, probably about 3 or 4 times a year. And then we advocate for provincial ministers wherever we can. But yeah, no, there's a lot of gaps in our community that we still need to work for. And some of it is our responsibility and some of it is other levels of responsibility.
Well, when I was, prior to coming to the coast, when I was at Whistler, I sat on the Advisory Planning Commission for the town center before a shovel ever went in the ground. So I know how much work is involved. And Whistler went through its growing pains, tremendous growing pains there. I can see many growing pains happening here. And that's, as I said, that's why I'm voicing my concerns. How you get a handle on it, I can't give you that answer.
Yeah.
It's a real tough one.
Yeah.
I think we have to get a little more control of it before we just keep handing out. How much money does someone have to make? Do they need to make $10 million on a development, or does it have to be 50 million to be happy? We've got to start looking at these things, and if we don't have the infrastructure, they just can't be okayed.
Yeah.
Director Pratt, if you don't mind,
Go ahead, Ryan.
I'm going to put on a different hat because I want to talk about what Ron is talking about, and the other side of me being part of these meetings and wanting to get more involved in the OCP is, yeah, I've also been a Sunshine Coaster for 4 years, and I've got young families here, and I'm watching this town grow and develop and have its struggles as well. And everything you say, Ron, is completely correct. But we have to figure out these problems, like you say, very quickly. But with Half Moon Bay in particular, I'm having a hard time with recruitment and retention because we just don't have any place for these people to live in our community at this time. And I got young families, and I don't like to use the words low cost housing because that's sort of a little bit different, but affordable housing is more of what we need, not for young families to be able to afford housing, not that they need low cost housing because they're in a certain demographic. We need affordable housing, and the only way we're going to get affordable housing back on the Sunshine Coast is to put out product on the market. We do not have enough product, which will drive costs because people with more money than possibly the ones trying to survive here have. So as I try to keep a fire department running for my community of Half Moon Bay, it's going to become very difficult if all the young men and women have to move out. And I've lost a lot of men and women over the last few years moving to places where they have product available to purchase, and we don't have any in Half Moon Bay, and we don't have any on the onsite of being available to us. So there's a double-edged sword here, and I understand that, but we have to think of both sides of this sword.
Get that housing in. Well, first of all, I'd like to say thank you very much to you and all of your firemen. We have had 2 fires on our little road here on Taylor Crescent. One, Avi Lewis's house that was saved, and the other one more recent, it burnt to the ground. Patrick Hobbs on both was first responder. I know Patrick really well as an old friend of his family. So thank you very much for all the work that you guys do. Now I know how hard it is to find people. I had a pub and a restaurant here on the coast for 40 years, virtually, maybe a little shorter than that, 35 plus. Finding staff every year, especially bringing them into a resort area. It's very busy in the summer and absolutely no one in the winter. I couldn't imagine having that business now with the price of fuel, for example. It would probably cost between $1,200 and $2,000 up and back to Vancouver for a weekend on your boat. And heaven forbid if you go out and do some trolling. So yeah, you're right. It's, I guess it's the, which should come first, the horse or the cart? Because we are in trouble, and we're in trouble. Look at every business on this coast, not just you guys, but every business has a sign out. Every one of them needs employees. Be it a service business or being a carpenter, try to find a carpenter. They're all very, very busy. Try to find a tile setter, try to find a plumber. You know, we can go on and on. We're in a very difficult position. So do we put more load on our few services that we've got right now, or we do some catch up and then put more load on it? I think we need to do some catch up first. There was a great picture of Lori and the others with shovels and breaking ground, but we still don't have another drop of water yet.
No.
I'll be a lot happier when I actually turn on the tap, and I'll believe it a lot more when we don't go beyond phase 2, as I was told we won't. I think Lori's exactly right. We need to be looking for more, especially water. We need to be looking more. How can you fight a fire without water? I mean, you know, so we're putting ourselves in a real dicey situation here on the coast that I've lived on for a long time.
Thank you, Ron, and thank you, Ryan. I appreciate that. Okay, so I have Landon as the last hand up. Oh, and then I've got Kelsey. So Kelsey is going to be my last speaker tonight because we're already a little bit over our 2 hours. And so Landon, I'm going to go to you, and then I'm going to go over to Kelsey.
Thanks, Lori. I just wanted to comment on the last comment about building more homes to create affordable housing. You know, in theory, yes, it opens up inventory, which makes it easier to find a place to live. But the problem is with these developments is that they are starting the benchmark price higher than the market value, driving up the cost in the neighborhood. Look at Bayview, for example. We had 1/2 acre to 3/4 acre, 1 acre lots in Half Moon Bay last year for less than $400,000. And then all of a sudden, $550,000 was the starting price for the lots on that development. Those all sold. Don't know how they sold without a development permit. That's a different issue. And then now the strata lots are being listed for $750,000, for some reason more than the cost of a freehold lot. So to say that adding more housing and allowing developers to increase the development in the area will actually create affordable homes is quite the contrary when we rely on developers that are playing out exactly how we're seeing in Half Moon Bay here.
Thanks, Landon. I know that was more of a comment than and an observation, and it's, yeah, the prices are, you know, the affordability, you know, when you're looking at affordable, you know, what is affordable? So and that's something that's all part of the conversation as well.
I guess sorry, I did miss the question there. My question is, when will the SCRD enforce the fact that a development should not be sold or put on the market until it has approval to actually become a development? That, I don't understand the loophole there, and perhaps you could elaborate on how that is possible. How do you sell properties? How do you put them on the market when it has not even crossed the table of the district for approval? It preemptively drives up the price of the real estate in the area.
Okay, and that's I need to be really careful when I answer that question, Landon, because of the properties have actually not technically completed. They're still subject to conditions being met on them, and I know that from the developer's disclosure, which you know, that's for anyone that was interested in purchasing a property or has purchased a property has to be able to, knows that it's it is a subject to sale, so it's not necessarily completed yet. So it's almost it's like purchasing a condo in an apartment building before it's done. You know, it's almost like it's kind of like spec purchasing in that kind of way. So for the enforcement of that, if they're doing something illegal, there's a different, that's not the SCRD that has the jurisdiction over that. That is I don't remember the exact legislation, but it is, it's under the Real Estate Act. Like it's, if there's something illegal that's happening there, like if they're selling property that doesn't, that isn't fully done. I see Len, do you have, can you save my explanation here?
Yes, you actually are absolutely right. This subdivision I was living in was several lots were sold. Well, many lots were sold before the subdivision was actually formally approved. And my brother did purchase some himself. And you actually become an investor in the company, and you have been promised a lot when the subdivision is approved. Now, I don't know that if that's happening, but that is one way that it does happen. And I was very happy to hear from Ron. He left the harbor quite a while ago, and it was great to hear from them. We're all here. My relatives were here 110 years ago, and it was because of low-cost housing, low-cost property. And my take is we need to enable it again somehow. And if it's property where you can put manufactured homes, manufactured trailers, my plea to all of us is we need to take one for the greater community and consider having them in our community. I'm quite concerned that there's widespread opposition to the low-end housing. And our community started with low-end housing, and we need to somehow get back there. But that's just my little political message, and I'm leaving.
Thank you, Len. So for last word, I'm going to go to my APC chair, Kelsey. Sorry to identify you as such, but thank you so much for being here tonight too.
No problem. I mean, it was interesting to me to listen to hear what the community's questions are. I just have a couple closing comments. First off, I'd like to invite I can still see 44 people on the call. As you mentioned in the beginning, APCs are public. We are on Zoom. The link is freely available on the SCRD website. If you Google Half Moon Bay APC, it's a couple clicks away. And I chair those meetings. I will admit people. I just ask that they identify themselves for the minutes. And they're brief meetings. I think most of them are only an hour, and people are welcome to come and if there's something on the agenda that is of interest to them, or just to attend a meeting. It is a useful piece of feedback for the SCRD when we discuss projects that might be coming forward. Second, I just wanted to thank you, Lori, for doing all of this and add my piece as in wearing a different hat as a supervisor of who is desperately trying to recruit staff at the hospital. And I really identified with what Ryan was saying in trying to find workers to fill spaces in our communities in jobs that are not optional, jobs that are not a luxury. Firefighters and myself, I'm in charge of the imaging department at the hospital, and I take care of patients every day who need services on our coast locally, and they also can't find housing. I have incredible challenges recruiting here, and these are professionals, like these are educated professional jobs. So I just want to thank Director Lee as well for bringing that up, that housing of all sorts is needed, and estate acreages have their place, but we need more than that, and we need more diversity of housing stock in the SCRD, not just within the districts that exist right now. So that's my part. And then finally, I'm happy to hear so many people eager to be involved in the upcoming OCP process that we'll have. So thanks, Lori, for doing this.
Okay. Well, with that, thank you so much, Kelsey. And thank you so much, Chief Daly, too, and for stepping up and speaking so much. Thank you to Directors McMahon and Lee for stepping up, too. Thank you to everyone for attending tonight and being here and asking questions, sending questions in ahead of time. Please make sure you put any comments or your email address if you want anything after. Please make sure you put it in the chat. I will be saving the chat after, and we will be sharing this online. Don't forget upcoming Linda, do you want to give a brief plug to the Community Association AGM, or not AGM, Town Hall on April the 6th?
Sure, thanks, Lori. We hadn't developed an agenda yet, but I have been taking pages and pages of notes. So I think one is going to definitely evolve from this conversation. Really glad to hear that we're going to refresh that conversation around the OCP. It was raised at the last couple of town halls, and I think, you know, everything that's been transpiring is leading to the fact that we maybe need to fast track that just a little bit. The housing crisis, the worker shortage crisis. So lots of fuel for that fire. April 6th at 6 p.m. by Zoom. I will send the link out a few days beforehand. The guest speaker is MLA Nicholas Simons. Lori, of course, will be there as well. Unfortunately, MP Weiler is out of the country, so he will not be available. His admin, Donna Bell, will sit in and take notes for him. If you have anything you wish to discuss aside from everything that's been raised tonight, and Lori, I'd like to liaise with you in formulating that, you know, that agenda. You can send it to info@halfmoon-bay.ca. That is our new email address linked to our bright and shiny new website. So thank you very much for that, Lori. Awesome.
Okay, thank you again, Linda.
You got way more people and way more activity than our town hall. So I have to get a lesson from you on how you did that.
I'm not sure. I also thank you everyone for being here tonight. And also like to acknowledge our other director in the audience, Andreas Ties. Next time I'll make him speak too, but thank you everyone. I'll just stick around. There he is. Thanks, Andres. All right, I'm going to close things up. I'm going to stop the recording now. Wow, we recorded the whole way through that.